In no way whatsoever do we accept responsibility for the quality of construction, safety of this project, or anything that might result from the use of this product. The complete responsibility depends on you, the person building it. It is your decision on how to build it. The video is only a guide.
To match the proper height of the lever. And then that goes around back to the governor linkage, which we'll get to at a later time. Then for the clutch, we made that a hand clutch. As you can see, we trimmed off all the excess parts on the clutch so that it just pivots off of the steering cross member that has a 1/2-inch bolt welded to the cross member. We also took and welded 2 nuts onto the clutch lever and welded a bolt through it with another bolt welded onto it like this as a T-handle that pivots, and that way it goes through the floor pan and then locks over center to tighten the belt. And then we get a nice round knob to go on the end of this bolt. Where we hook the throttle linkage onto the governor. We take and we bend this tab out and weld on a piece of machine screw and put a couple of nuts on here so that we can adjust the distance and the leverage so that you do not bend the governor mechanism with the pressure from your foot. You want to make sure that the stop is on the foot, not on the governor mechanism. This way your throttle will be controlled through the governor mechanism so that you won't overspeed the engine and blow it up. You can bypass this, which I don't recommend, by taking this cable off of here and running it over to the carburetor on this bracket, extending this screw the same way with nuts, and then running your throttle linkage onto that with a spring comes out to here. You also have to take and adjust the air cleaner with a hammer so that it misses this screw.
Hi, I'm Scott Leaf.
And I'm Brent Seiler.
And we're going to tell you about the modifications that we've made to the transaxle.
This is a large diameter pulley, which is normally used for the driven pulley. And we took a small diameter pulley off the engine and welded it concentrically onto the large diameter pulley. We will use the small diameter pulley as the driven pulley, which will make it run at a higher speed. Meanwhile, the large diameter pulley will be used for the braking system, using a stationary brake belt, which will make it slow down better at high speeds because it covers more surface area.
Since the transaxle will now be upside down, you're going to want to put a new seal in there, and seals are different sizes, so you want to make sure you get 6-3-7-2. That's the size.
This is the axle housing, and this usually has needle bearings in it that will probably be shot by the time you get this. And the axle will probably be worn down. So what you can do is you can buy a new axle for $35 and new bearings for $10. Or else for $5 you can polish down the axle and buy 3/4 by 1 inch by 1.5 inch long bushing. And just push this in here tight and use it like that. This is a transaxle housing, and this holds the differential.
This is the differential, and what this does is when you make a turn, your tires turn at different speeds, and the outside tire turns faster than the inside tire, so that's what this does. It allows it to do that.
This is the divider between the two halves of the transaxle housing. This is the bottom half of the transaxle housing, and this holds all the gears. You want to be sure to take the gears out and clean them and put them back in.
A very important modification that you should do to this is back here where the input shaft comes in, there's a bushing. You want to make 2 grooves, one at the top and one at the bottom of the bushing. And then you want to make one that goes down the inside of the bushing. And what this allows for is for oil to get to the input shaft when it's rotating at a high velocity.
Because the transaxle will be running at high speed and under extreme pressure, we recommend you use Slick 50 transaxle fluid, and you need 4 ounces and 18 ounces of 30-weight oil in your transaxle.
Thank you for joining us.
Okay, these are the headers that we use on our Pro Street lawnmowers. They're a basic plumbing fixture that you can buy at any hardware store. To make these, you just take your washer and you mark off where you want the tabs. Usually you want one on the top and one on the bottom. Then you take it and you put it in a vice grips.
You might want to have tape on the vise so that it won't hurt the chrome.
And then you want to cut at your marks. Like so. There. And then you need to bend this down with the vice grips. And then you want to put it the rest of the way down with the punch. Then after you do that, you might want to bring it back up a little bit with the vice grips, although it looks like we got it pretty good here. And then you take a big screwdriver and put it under the tab because you need a hole, a center hole, to start the drill. Like so. And you take your drill and put the hole in there and you're done. And you've got your side pipes. Now that we've made our headers, we need to punch a hole in our hood for them to go. To do this, you need an 1.5-inch hole punch, which you probably won't have, so if you go down to an electrical contractor, they'll probably do it for you for free because you're a kid and you should have your 3/8-inch hole drilled already. Now the way this works is this piece here, you put this on the sheet metal like this, and this piece here comes through like this and cuts the sheet metal. You get a perfect hole every time. Put it on like this. Get the air wrench. And perfect hole. Now that we have our 4 holes punched in the side of our hood, we just take our headers and they fit perfectly right into the hole. You take 2 sheet metal screws like this, just screw them in. And tighten them down with a screwdriver. And as you can see, we've got 4 perfect headers.
Your Pro Street lawnmower running and you get all the bugs out of it, then you're ready for the paint job. All you have to do is take a picture of it and take it down to your local body shop and show the guys down there. Most likely, they'll paint it for you for free, mostly because you're a kid and they probably think back at the old days when they were a kid, or if you put the name of their business on your wing, they can kind of sponsor you, and it's good advertising for them when you go to car shows and show it, and when everybody else sees it. Or if they don't want to do that, they will most likely give you or sell you some paint really cheap that they have left over from some other car. It only takes about a half a quart to paint it, and they probably have that much left over. So as you can see, the paint job is not really going to cost you that much money, and a good paint job really makes a difference and will give you a higher resale value. So you're better off using good paint. As you can see, we have our completed, sandblasted, primed, and finished painted chassis. We took and we filled in all the holes that used to be drilled in the side of the frame, and we also put this filler plate in all along here so that it would look better. It is not really necessary as far as strength goes to have this piece, but it does look a lot nicer. It also makes it a little more difficult to work on the engine and the brakes. So if you're just building this cart for fun, I wouldn't install it. If you're building it to look really good, I would. This is the transaxle that's installed. One of the modifications you have to make is to drill a small hole in what used to be the drain plug that's now the breather. There's not enough dirt that will get into this small hole to cause a problem. We also drill the same size small holes in each one of the axles so that you can grease the axles basically one time with this type of a needle type grease fitting. You could put a regular grease cert on there, but it's not necessary because you'll probably only grease them once in a lifetime. Another modification was with the shifter. We simply just cut the shifter off to get the main installation done, and it's easier to work on it. Then after you put the rear deck lid on and you have the shifter hole cut in the center of the rear deck lid, then you can weld the shifting lever on in the correct location. We also made a modification to the brake rod. To get it to be the proper length, we simply cut it, overlapped it at the right length, and welded it back together. Then you can make the final adjustment at the disc brake cam assembly itself. And you can also see here is where we have the cable clamps to clamp our belt brake on. It goes around and is a friction brake on this large diameter pulley, and then is also clamped onto the back of the frame. So those are the basic modifications that we did to this part of the frame. Now we'll go to the clutch and the steering. Okay, here we have our modified rack and pinion steering with the pitman arm that we welded on. We also have 5/8 inch nuts that are underneath the steering mechanism to space it up the proper amount so everything fits. We also have our clutch mechanism here that has a special 1/2 inch lock nut to keep it firm, and yet the nut does not turn. We installed a 1/2 inch piece of plywood underneath the tightening pulley to keep the belt from going underneath the pulley, keep it more aligned as we tighten it. Here we have our engine after giving it a complete DuPont overhaul. The only other thing you usually have to do to the engine is tighten the head bolts, which could have came loose over a period of time. We also made a special exhaust system for it that fits underneath the cylinder head and exhausts through the frame. You can make something very similar to this or whatever's practical for your application. We also put studs in the motor mount bolt holes so that it's a lot easier to mount your engine. And it makes it easy for taking the engine in and out several times without having to put either bolts in the hole to get it in the proper location or to put nuts on it to hold it there. we put a smaller diameter drive pulley on to get the proper speed ratio that we wanted. It's important that if you ever take the engine out, that you only set it on its back or in its normal running position, so that you don't get oil on top of the cylinder head between the piston and the head, because you could have a liquid lock when you have oil in that position, and it will bend your connecting rod and ruin your engine. And as you can see, we left the solenoids for the starter in its regular position mounted on the engine, along with the throttle cables, the choke, and all the electrical stuff is left on the engine unit itself. Now we go to install it. All you simply have to do is pick the engine up, carry it over, and line the bolt holes up, and you have your engine installed, and simply put the nuts on from the bottom and hook up your throttle and other connections. Now we're going to go through some of the accessories that we have. First, we have the blade. This is a regular hay sickle type of blade. It is very dangerous, but it looks cool. That's why we have it. You can use it as a blade, and it will actually cut, even though it's not very practical. You can also use it as a bumper if you turn it up and lock the blade in the upward position. It's a lot safer this way. Some people paint the bottom of it silver so that it looks like one of those grills off an old Buick. It's a lot safer driving around the car shows with it up. Actually, it is more recommended to put a regular bumper on here or no bumper on here. It is simply mounted with some 1/4 inch by 1 inch flat that is welded to the axle. Next, we have our wing that is mounted with struts that we made out of a simple piece of conduit. We took and we flattened the conduit in a vise. Then we took and welded washers on at the proper angle, and we welded nuts on the inside of the conduit. And then there's bolts that come in from the underneath side of the fender. We did basically the same thing at the top, which makes a great sign for somebody who wants to sponsor you, like a body shop, that you could maybe talk into painting your vehicle for free if you sponsor their business by having their name on the sign. And then you can put Pro Street Lawnmowers on the side, or whatever little logo you want on the side. We also have our wheelie bars that are built in the very same fashion, with the washers welded on at the proper angle, a nut welded on the inside of the conduit, and then bolted from the inside. This type of vehicle will not do a wheel stand because the clutch, belt clutch, is not strong enough to do that. But it is good for picking the vehicle up, or also for standing on if you want to ride on the vehicle. It's strong enough that you can actually stand on it, and you can kind of do wheel stands with it that way. As you can see here, we have the completed unit. The part we're going to go over now is the seat. It's a very simple design seat. You do not have to use a sewing machine, or you do not have to take it to an upholstery place to have this done. It's so simple you can make this seat yourself at home. We make these little armrests that go over the holes that are in your deck lid, and you can use those holes to screw down your armrests. The bottom and the back are also very simple. We are going to go over on how we're going to make those right now. These are the components of the seat. These are the armrests, the back, and the bottom of the seat. As you can see, it's just stapled together. Anybody can do this with a simple staple gun. This seam here is staple stitched with a staple gun. It's a very simple procedure to do. You want to start out with the simplest pieces first, which are the armrests. We went to a carpet place and got some heavy-duty foam rubber, high density, for all our padding. You simply cut it out the same size as your armrests, which are 12 inches long and 2 inches wide. And then you have 1.5 inches of overlap on each side, front and back. So you simply line them up on top of your piece, staple the ends first, pull the end up tight, and staple it. Pull the other end up tight. Staple that down. The tricky part is right on the corner to get it folded over so it looks really good. But you start in the middle and staple it, one on each side. Then to get the corner, you want to pull this in and pull this over so that it fits perfect line like that. And then you got to push down real hard with the staple gun and staple that in there. Now we're going to go over how to make the back. This is a finished back for a square type of deck lid. It's a little bit wider because it's square. It's 15.5 inches wide. If you have a round type of deck lid, it's only 12 inches wide, and they're both 5.5 inches tall. Okay, you want to use the same high-density foam rubber for the backing on this. We've already pre-cut our pieces that we need. You need one piece that's 4 inches wide, two pieces that are 1.25 inches wide. You want to have a gap where the staple stitch goes. Then you also want to use another piece that's 9 by 12 to go over the whole thing and staple stitch it right down the center of this line. But first, we want to tack staple this piece in place so it doesn't move on us. You got to really push the staple gun down hard so that you sink the staples through the foam rubber. If you don't, you'll have to pull them out with the pliers. You can use an electric staple gun if you got one, or this type works good too. Line these up. You can't actually staple through all this if you try hard enough. So that kind of just holds it in place. Then you want to staple it right down the seam here after you tack the bottom together. Okay, because you want to staple it right where this seam is. Okay? And that's a little difficult. If you don't have a good eye, you can use this ruler and draw a line down there and follow that. Okay. So, put the gun in, and you want to get it nice and tight all the way down on this, right between the crack. Same thing on the other end, staple it, and then just follow your line right on through, and you got to push the gun all the way down. It's very important. You want to put several staples in there. You're going to re-staple it when you put your cloth over the top. Now you just bend this around and staple it on the back. Okay, so that's all the foam rubber. It's starting to take form. Like you see, the net part mesh is on the outside. Okay, we've already pre-cut our cloth to 16 by 12. So you got a little bit of extra, you got 2 inches on each side extra and a few inches extra on the top. Then what you want to do is you want to start at the bottom, pull up the minimum amount, and staple it after you center it. Okay, the next thing is to staple right down the seam. You want to pull it, you know, just snug. Okay? Now you got to get that line right where that goes, and you want to try to get it as straight as physically possible.